Issues of spirituality and sexuality have been at the forefront of human experience as long as there has been human experience. But often in the LGBT community, there is a separation between our spiritual life and our real life. And we're going to speak about that tonight with the Dr. Rev Lea Brown of MCC. Welcome.
Thank you.
So for the uninitiated, tell us all what MCC stands for.
MCC stands for Metropolitan Community Church, and often I'm asked, what church are you a part of? And I say MCC, and people say, yes, but what church is that? And I say MCC. MCC is a denomination. It's been around now for about 42 years. It was founded in Southern California by Reverend Troy Perry, back in a time when there wasn't such a thing, specifically for lesbian and gay people primarily. And it's been around all this time, and we now have over 200 churches all over the world. And in any MCC, you will find folks from all different flavors of Christianity and also all kinds of spiritual traditions that are not Christianity.
Yeah.
So,
you know, as a former Catholic altar boy, of course, I'm just shocked to know that there are openly gay people in the priesthood or the ministry or something.
There are.
I know. I remember reading once that unofficially 60% of the Roman Catholic clergy was gay. So
I'm shocked at the number so low.
I know. I was about to say, but dumb bum shing. Now, Metropolitan Community Church of San Francisco has been a leader, I would argue, in the whole MCC movement. But there are MCCs all over the country. You just came from Wichita Falls, Texas. What was that like?
That was an amazing experience. It's a scary thing to be an out gay person in that part of the world, and yet I led a congregation of just incredibly courageous people and good people who are just trying to live their lives and be able to be out where they can. And it is no joke there about being out, that you can lose your job, you can lose your children, you can lose your life, and that is a very real thing here in 2010. And there in Wichita Falls, there was our church and there was a bar, and that was in a city of 100,000 people. And that's all there was for a 2-hour drive in any direction.
So how big was your congregation?
There was about a little under 50 when I got there and nearly 100 when I left.
So is the MCC Church of Wichita Falls kind of like the black churches in the South during civil rights? You went and you didn't want anyone to see you walk in there because you're afraid someone was going to be waiting for you when you come out? Is it that bad still?
Well, there were a few people who were afraid to park their cars outside the church. And actually, when I was there, we bought a new building. It was a much bigger building in a more visible part of town, and we put a big sign out front. And there were a few people who were worried about that, but we went ahead and did it, and it's been awesome. The church continued to grow from there. So,
do you think that coming out as a spiritual person is one of the last kind of
I do.
Closets in the LGBT wardrobe?
I do. From time to time, I'll ask my congregation in a sermon, raise your hand if you're out about being queer, and all the hands go up, and then I'll say, now, tell me if you're out about that you go to church, and it's very different. I struggle with it sometimes. I mean, the quickest conversation killer on the planet when I'm in a queer circle is, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a minister, and then there's just dead silence.
Yeah, and then they stop telling all the dirty jokes.
Yeah, people get very uncomfortable, and I mean, rightfully so. We've been so beaten up by organized religion in all kinds of ways that I can't really blame people, but it's such a tragedy because we have allowed institutionalized religion to cut us off from our spirituality, which is everyone's birthright, in my opinion. And to have that taken away is just, it's beyond a travesty. And so part of what we're trying to do is let people know their support if you want to reclaim that, if that's something that's an important thing to you.
Now, I once heard MCC described as kind of uber Protestantism. It was kind of like a little bit of everything for queer people. How would you define it? Because you were educated in a Baptist seminary, correct?
To begin with, until I came out, my first 2 years, I was at Golden Gate Baptist Seminary in Mill Valley. And my last year of seminary was at Pacific School of Religion over in Berkeley, and I was able to be out there. There's MCC, every local congregation is different. MCC San Francisco is sort of unto a plane in itself. It's just has folks from all different traditions, and I would say probably about 60% of the congregation identifies as Christian and 40% as not Christian. And at any given service, we'll have someone who's Catholic sitting next to someone who's pagan, sitting next to someone who's Jewish, sitting next to an atheist, sitting next to a Methodist, sitting next to a Baptist. It makes worship services very interesting.
So what do all these people have in common?
Our values. We are really centered on our 4 core values. And now that I'm on TV, I'm probably going to take it over the wall. Equality, social action, spiritual transformation, and radical inclusion. Those are our 4 values, and we find that those values unite us across all of our different spiritual beliefs and backgrounds.
In 2010, in the LGBT community, what do you think is the most challenging part of radical inclusion?
Oh, man.
Is it our trans brothers and sisters, or our Muslim brothers and sisters? Is it our atheist brothers and sisters?
Yes. I think from what I see that our community has a tremendous way to go when it comes to trans rights and inclusion of the trans community. Just an amazing level of ignorance, I think, I see all over the place. Within the spiritual community, I think I know in my own congregation, we struggle with how do we have something for everybody and keep everybody happy. And so I think until we are more concerned with what makes our brother or sister happy and we put ourselves into that and creating that as long as we're all about, well, what makes me happy the most.
Yeah, well, you raise an interesting point. I remember once hearing someone at Grace Cathedral, I forget who it was. I think it was Dean Jones, but I could be wrong. And someone said, well, I don't like the way you're doing something. I think you should do this. And he said, that's fine, but we're an Anglican church, and this is the way we do Christianity. Is there a danger in being radically inclusive and just losing your focus altogether?
It's a struggle. We do struggle with it, I will be honest. We wrestle, and we try to have, we have 3 different worship services a week. They all have very different flavors to them. One is more specifically Christian and liturgical. One has a very sort of high energy gospel music, but it's interfaith. And then on Wednesday nights, we have a service that's no sermon, no communion. It's just singing and prayer by candlelight, and all of the songs they would fit in just about any spiritual tradition on the planet. They're all about the values that we hold. And then throughout the week, we have all kinds of programs. We have a series called Many Lights, where we have a speaker once a month who is they're representing a wide variety of spiritual traditions. We have usually an evening of Buddhist meditation one night a month. We try to see ourselves as a spiritual center and a place where we celebrate queer spirituality. And in fact, that's what we say, that we've been a home for queer spirituality for 40 years. And that's what we try to celebrate. And it's never boring.
I've never heard 2 congregations in San Francisco described as boring, MCC or Glide. But now, to use the example of Glide, also a church that practices its own form of radical inclusion, how do you two, I shouldn't say you two, but how do churches that have this similar agenda of inclusiveness as opposed to this is what we do and you're not welcome, how do you spread a similar message to very different congregations?
I think our values are very similar, and that's kind of a funny thing to keep going back to, but it really is true. And I think across the world, really, if we are all so many different spiritual traditions and ethnicities and backgrounds, but if we can center around our common values, that's what brings us together. And certainly, we've worked closely with Glide around Prop 8, and we've gone to interfaith services there, and their folks come to us for interfaith services, and I've been in planning meetings with their clergy, and we all just work together because we know that ultimately we're all focused on the same thing.
When we have a president who says that he is Christian, but has done a lot to open dialogue between the executive branch, the presidency, and the LGBT community, but still says that he's against same-sex marriage. What do you say to our Christian, gay-loving president?
Well, I would say that I would hope he gets reelected, and that once he's reelected, I hope he goes for broke.
So you're a realist?
I am. Yeah, it's a real world out there. I think we've come a long way in really not much time, and I absolutely understand wanting to go faster. I see people every day in my congregation who are broken by homophobia every single day.
Well, and people from your congregation who have been broken by the church.
Yes, that's a big one, yeah. Yeah.
So what do you say to them? They say, why are you doing this when the church has been my oppressor, and you're preaching from a pulpit?
I would say that not all churches are alike, and that queer people have a right to spirituality as much as anybody. And we also have a right, I particularly think that as queer people, we have a special gift to bring to spirituality, which is sexuality. I think the two are inseparable, and that the gift that we bring to religion, if they would let us in and bring this message, is that the two should not be separated. And in fact, that as queer people, whether we ever step into a church or a synagogue or a mosque, we are powerful conduits of sexuality and spirituality together. And that the two really are inextricably linked, and that's something that we have to give. And I say to queer people, find your place where you can be spiritually supported. Everyone deserves that. If spirituality is something you want to claim in your life, don't let anyone take that from you. And there are places of worship, and there are communities of faith and spirit that will support you in your journey. What
has been the most painful day of your ministry?
Oh, wow. Whew. Probably the day I left MCC San Francisco. I had been there for over 10 years as a volunteer clergy and then as the acting executive director of the church's foundation when I left there to go to Wichita Falls. And then the day I left Wichita Falls to come back here. You just, you love
Two
your people.
sides of the same coin. What about the greatest day of your ministry?
The day I was ordained. Yeah, without a doubt. It's the only time my parents ever saw me in the pulpit.
And why is that? Have they not come back to, or they passed away?
They passed away, and it was the only opportunity they ever had. Really, they lived quite a ways away.
In our last few moments, if someone's watching this who says, "Oh God, just one more Bible thumper telling me I need to come back to church," but they're saying that because they're afraid, they really want to, and they're looking for community, what would you say to say, come in, you're welcome?
I'd say come in, you will be joined by a lot of people who are scared to come in. The statistics show that 60% of all people who come to MCC San Francisco first come to the church multiple times and stand outside the door before they're able to come in, and I was one of them. So
we've been speaking with the Reverend Dr. Lea Brown, someone who's let a lot of people in. And next we're going to be speaking with the Gay Glam Band, Ejector. We'll be right back.